Have you ever felt secretly exhausted from trying to stay positive all the time? Like no matter how many affirmations you whisper or smiles you force, something inside still feels heavy. It's almost as if the world is screaming, "Just think happy thoughts," while your heart is quietly begging, "Can I just breathe for a moment?" This is where so many people get stuck, caught between toxic positivity and real inner peace. And honestly, it's no wonder spiritual exhaustion hits so hard. Because here's the uncomfortable truth most people won't admit. Positivity isn't powerful enough to carry you through life's storms. But God's unshakable joy is. It's a divine joy that doesn't depend on mood swings, good days, or perfect circumstances. It doesn't break under pressure. It doesn't evaporate the moment chaos shows up. It's the kind of joy that holds you steady, even when your world feels like it's falling apart. And the best part? You don't have to earn it, fake it, or force it. This joy flows from God's presence, from the gentle comfort and guidance of the Holy Spirit, from learning to let go, surrender, and finally stop pretending everything is fine when it's not. If you've been longing for emotional healing with God, for biblical joy instead of temporary happiness, for inner peace through God rather than the pressure to perform positivity, you're exactly where you need to be. Today, you're going to discover how people just like you are learning to overcome negativity, stop forcing positivity, and tap into a spiritual resilience that doesn't crack under stress. So, take a breath. You're about to step into a deeper kind of Christian encouragement, one that actually lasts. Why forcing positivity leaves you empty. You've probably noticed how easy it is to plaster a smile over deep cracks in your heart, hoping it'll hold everything together. But you also know that forced positivity only hides the struggle. It never heals it. You may even feel guilty when you can't stay upbeat, forgetting that God's unshakable joy doesn't demand performance. That guilt turns into spiritual exhaustion because pretending is draining. And once you realize that divine joy is something God plants, not something you push yourself to create, you finally feel permission to breathe again. Think about how often you've tried to stay positive during chaos, only to feel worse. It's like sticking a Band-Aid on a leaking roof, helpful for a moment, but never a real fix. Real emotional healing with God comes from honesty, not pressure. So instead of reciting cheerful phrases when you're overwhelmed at work or at home, you can pause and admit, "Lord, I'm not okay today." That honesty invites Holy Spirit comfort and opens you to God's peace, something far deeper than forced happiness. You might even relate to those moments when you finally break down and whisper, "God, I'm tired." And strangely, instead of feeling weak, you feel seen. That's because biblical joy isn't born from ignoring pain. It grows when you bring that pain into God's presence. Overcoming negativity starts with acknowledging the storm, not denying it. God never asked you to fake strength. He offers God's strength in hard times. And once you experience that shift, you'll be ready for something even more powerful in the next topic. The difference between happiness and God's unshakable joy. You've probably noticed that happiness rises and falls depending on what's happening around you. One good moment lifts you up, one setback drags you down. That's because happiness is emotional, but God's unshakable joy is spiritual and steady. It doesn't swing with circumstances. And as you learn the difference, your whole approach to Christian spirituality begins to transform. Honestly, That's one reason people from all over the world keep watching. Everyone relates to this truth in their own way. And if you're feeling it too, go ahead and tap like so you don't lose this message. You may realize that happiness depends on achievements or smooth days, but joy in difficult times comes from God's presence, not perfect conditions. For example, when you sit quietly and read a psalm before bed, something settles inside you, something deeper than a simple good mood. That's inner peace through God growing in you. And it's fascinating how someone in a busy city and someone in a quiet village can experience this same peace differently, which is why it's always interesting when viewers mention where they're watching from. Now look at this. As you learn to trust God in chaos, you stop chasing emotional highs and start seeking Holy Spirit guidance, which anchors you far more deeply. Maybe you've noticed that after a draining day, a simple prayer in your car brings clarity that happiness alone couldn't. That's spiritual resilience, gently reshaping your heart. And honestly, messages like this reach so many because they resonate regardless of culture or background. So, if this is hitting home for you, subscribing ensures you don't miss what comes next. And speaking of what's next, the next insight goes even deeper. There comes a point when you realize you can't carry everything on your own, no matter how strong you think you should be. That moment when you whisper, "God, I can't do this anymore," becomes the doorway to letting go and surrendering to God. You stop trying to fix yourself with willpower and finally allow Holy Spirit comfort to reach places you've buried for years. And strangely, surrender doesn't make you weaker. It makes you steadier. That's where divine joy starts filling the gaps that forcing positivity never could. As you practice surrender, you also learn to trust that God is working even in silence. Maybe that looks like writing your worries in a journal, praying Psalm 46, or simply sitting still for 2 minutes and breathing in God's peace. These small choices open the door for God's strength in hard times, turning your spiritual exhaustion into renewal. And every time you release even one fear, you feel a little more anchored. It's in these moments that you begin noticing how joy versus happiness are not just different ideas, they're different worlds. Then something powerful happens. You stop clinging to outcomes and start clinging to God. You realize that finding peace in God makes you more resilient than any self-help strategy ever could. You begin responding to stress with prayer instead of panic, with trust instead of tension. Little by little, this becomes your lifestyle, a quiet but fierce spiritual resilience that keeps you steady regardless of circumstances. Now that you've walked through this journey of God's unshakable joy, the real question is, what will you do with it? You've learned how to stop forcing positivity, how to let God's peace replace emotional pressure, and how to invite Holy Spirit guidance into the parts of your life you've been carrying alone. But knowledge only becomes transformation when you put it into practice. So what's the first step you'll take today toward living with divine joy instead of temporary happiness? Will you start by being honest with God about what's weighing you down? Will you set aside 5 quiet minutes tonight to breathe, pray, and feel His presence restore your spirit? Or will you finally let go of that fear you've been gripping, trusting that God's strength in hard times is far more reliable than your own? These questions matter because your breakthroughs don't come from trying harder. They come from surrendering deeper. Before you go, tell me this. Which part of this message connected with you the most? What moment made you think, yes, that's exactly what I've been feeling? And if you're ready to keep growing in Christian encouragement, Christian mental health, and finding peace in God, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notifications. There's so much more coming: wisdom, clarity, and spiritual healing that can reshape your walk with God in ways you never imagined.